start with the work on language testing for citizenship, perhaps because that was the focus of the interest in chapter 1 of the book. That article, of course, is 2009, and by the time that article was published, I had been working on those discourses for a considerable amount of time already, going back certainly to 2000. In 2001, there were what became known as, well, I suppose, race riots, or certainly inner city riots, sometimes euphemistically, in the UK. And some leading politicians had suggested in the aftermath of these riots that one of the reasons for the riots, one of the causative factors, was that some people, particularly women, in some communities were not able to or did not speak English, which really caught my attention because I really couldn't see any link between language and people throwing stones at the police in the street or burning cars and so on. So I pursued this and started to put together the discourses as they were repeated and recontextualized, said again in different contexts. So an argument might be made in one context and then repeated in the House of Commons or in the House of Lords or in a major broadsheet newspaper, for example. And so the discourses start to become more legitimate and start to gain more power through what we might call chains of discourse. And in 2002, the Home Secretary at that time introduced new legislation requiring that applicants for British citizenship pass an English test in order to become citizens. And I continued working on this, and in 2005 published a monograph on all of these the sort of discourse and the politics around language testing for citizenship. But it was in 2007, I think, that the government then decided to focus specifically on the spouses of existing British citizens who wanted to come to Britain to live, to join their husband or wife. And until that point, that particular group had not been required to pass the English test. But they now would be required. The notion being that, well, if you're married to a British person, we'll let you in anyway. Whereas now, the people who were married to a British person were not going to be allowed in unless they passed an English test. And so once again, this caught my attention, not least because it was almost completely unremarked upon in the media. It's the kind of thing that doesn't really get much attention because you've already got language tests for citizenship. So a lot of people don't really notice the difference between asking people who are in the UK to pass an English test and people who are in a different country to pass an English test if they want to come to this country. There seemed to be a preference on the part of the government speakers and the government texts that it would be better if everybody spoke English all the time rather than any other languages. But I actually wonder whether we're really talking about monolingual ideologies or whether in fact there is such a thing as monolingual ideologies, because I think the ideology that probably is at work in those particular pieces of legislation is a kind of exclusionary discourse. So I think when language becomes part of a political argument, it often is emblematic of something else. And so I think language is, I think the government recognizes, cleverly you might say, that most people think it's a good idea if everybody speaks or can speak English if they're living in the UK. In fact, when I say most people, I mean most migrants as well. That it's a good thing if you can, not necessarily that you do, but that you can speak English if required. It's the worst way. I can't see that testing people helps them learn at all. All right, you might say, well, if you coerce people in that way and say, well, you've got to take that test, well, okay, they might learn the answers to the questions in the blue book, the Life in the United Kingdom book, which is used as the device by which the would-be citizens are supposed to demonstrate their proficiency in English. They might be able to learn the answers to those questions, though in fact most people who are British citizens and have tried to take that test tend to fail. So so no. I think if you want to teach, if you want migrants to learn to be able to speak English, I don't think you can do anything to make them use English, despite what Tony Blair said in 2006. But if you want to enable them to be proficient in English, and as I say, I think most of us do want that, including the migrants, then you have to properly resource English classes. You have to make them free of charge, which they aren't. You have to make them available in the localities where people want them. You have to make them available close enough to where people live so that they don't have to spend money traveling to the English classes. You have to provide childcare so that when people are taking their class, somebody is looking after their children. And all of those are easily within the reach of government resource to provide. All of those things can be provided. And I would argue that if the government really wanted all migrants to learn English, then they would also resource the education of people as teachers of these classes, and so you'd have more teachers, more sets of premises, they'd be more local, and they would be tailored to the specific requirements of the people who are doing the learning. But none of that happens. I mean, I'm not saying there isn't a really, really very good work going on in the teaching of English to migrants. There is, of course, but it tends to be underfunded, under-resourced, and I think a lot of people don't attend because it doesn't feel possible for them. And so yeah, I really don't think that English language for English language tests for citizenship are very much to do with wanting to teach people to speak English.